The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host and producer, Kristina Lou, along with my co-host that needs no introduction, Otto Lowe's, longtime volunteer supporter, friend, and the face of PI, really.
Good morning, Kristina.
Good morning, Otto. We are de-thawing, and here, if you're listening to us live, it's quite cold outside today. So we are, but we have a lot of warm conversation. So I think we're just going to, heat things up, right, Otto?
A lot of people working hard out there in the parking lot.
Absolutely. That's right. Shout out to that.
Trying to get the snow out of the way.
Yes, I can't wait for spring, but I digress. This morning, we are joined by Katie Stoll, Assistant Director of the Long Island Crisis Center, and Dani Silverstein, who is the 988 Director for all of Nassau County. And we're talking about their organization, the Long Island Crisis Center. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. So I'm very familiar with Long Island Crisis Center and all the wonderful work that you guys do. But even doing research for this, I didn't even realize the scope of things. So let's just start from the beginning. What is the Long Island Crisis Center?
So we are a 24/7 crisis intervention agency. We have been around since 1971, so a very long time. We do a few different things. So, of course, we have our crisis hotlines. We operate 6 different lines, 988, which I'll let Dani talk about more in a little bit. Our flagship hotline, which is the Middle Earth hotline. Children of Hope hotline, which is to prevent the murder of infants. The town of Huntington also has a contract with us for a hotline that we operate for town residents 24/7. And then we answer the Nassau County Mobile Crisis Unit. So if somebody is having a behavioral health emergency in Nassau County and they need an on-site evaluation or transport to the hospital, and they don't want to call 911 and the police, they can call the mobile crisis team instead, and they'll come out to assess people. In addition to that, we also have a chat so people can text or use the computer to chat with us online if they don't want to talk to a counselor on the phone. We have our community education program, which goes into schools, elementary, middle, and high schools across Nassau and Western Suffolk to talk about topics like suicide prevention and mental health, cyberbullying, how to manage your emotions. We also do trainings for faculty and staff and other professionals on those topics as well. And then we have the LGBTQ plus side of our organization that's called PFY. And they do things like STI and HIV testing. They run support groups for families and queer people across Long Island. They do a lot of events for queer people across Long Island. They do a lot more that I unfortunately am not as familiar with, so I can't speak to everything that they do. But that is kind of an overview.
Wow.
Dani wants to...
Who would make the contact? Like, is it the person who is in crisis, or is it somebody, a family or a friend? Normally, what's the flow?
Yeah.
It could really be either one. Actually, on 988, which is the 3-digit number for the National Suicide and Crisis Prevention Lifeline that launched in July of 2022, we get calls from people who are in crisis themselves. We get calls from people who are concerned about people in crisis or who may be thinking of suicide. So the calls really run the gamut in terms of who they're from and what they're about.
Is the primary crisis suicide, or what would it be like the top 3 reasons why somebody would have a crisis that they would call?
It's so funny you should ask that. I just ran the statistics on that.
Oh.
So in 2025, our top 3 concerns were actually not related to suicide. They were related more to relationship issues with family, friends, partners, spouses. We also run into a lot of people seeking some sort of socialization. And we get a lot of calls from individuals who just feel very isolated, which I think is pretty common now. And we are certainly seeing that on the hotline. The third primary concern is usually either suicide or first party, so someone who is actively thinking about suicide themselves, or someone who is calling, basically feeling depressed or anxious.
So relationship issues creating feelings of not being well, if you will.
Yeah.
And I can think of a long list of reasons, nowadays, bullying and
Yeah.
just a lot of bad things going on. Frankly, I've heard stories from somebody that some kids in high school, for example, have issues at home a lot of times, which when you grew up in an environment that didn't have that at home,
Yeah.
you don't really understand that not every home is perfect. And there are parents that are not so great with their kids. And then the kids get all messed up. And like I have a granddaughter who I did say is a social worker in a school, a high school. And she has kind of told me that there are a lot of situations where what goes on at home has caused issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is sad, really, but it's a fact. So those kinds of students may, like, the first line of defense, I think, is like in the school. You get involved then with the people within the school system.
Do we get involved with the people in the school
Yeah.
system? So we do have our community education program, like I mentioned earlier. And sometimes if we have a community educator who is out at a school presenting on a topic like, say, suicide, we might have a teacher or a student come up to the presenter afterwards and say, hey, like, I've been feeling this way. Or the teacher could say, I know a student that's feeling this way. Would you talk to them? What do I do? What do I tell them? And in that case, usually the community educator will sit with the student, talk with them for a little while, and then take them over to the school social worker or school psychologist to make sure that they're getting hooked up with the more ongoing support that they might need. But sometimes the student doesn't want to tell somebody that they know.
Yeah, right.
They don't want to tell the school psychologist. They don't want to tell their teacher because it's really scary to talk to somebody that you know and admit these dark and frightening feelings. So oftentimes we get calls from those students. We just had one from a student in Suffolk on Wednesday, I believe. We were just at the school the day before. They got our keychain, they got our number, they decided they wanted to call. And for a lot of people, kids and adults, it's the first time they're telling somebody something major that's going on for them. Because when you call a hotline or when you chat into our chat line, you can't see our faces, right? You don't know who you're talking to. It's totally anonymous. You are in control. So if it gets too scary or it gets too real, you can hang up and it's over. So our counselors hear a lot of firsts for people.
Is there a physical location as well? Like it's called the crisis center, which makes me think center, like there's a place where people actually walk in or...
Not anymore. We used to.
Yeah.
So I was a volunteer there from 2008 to 2014. And when I was volunteering, we did take walk-ins. And at some point in the 2010s, we stopped because it's a big liability.
Yeah, of course. Especially when what you're dealing with.
Right.
Well, also 2010 and 2026, there's a huge difference, I think, in how people communicate. You mentioned the chatting and the texting and whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's so huge, because when I was doing the research for that, I said, in addition to, obviously calling, the idea of having an online chat must be so huge, I could think, for like young people, because that's like the mode of communication, right? And on top of that, it's like, it's even taking away that stress of like verbalizing something that might be scary to, vocally say. So, it's easier to, listen, even something as simple, I know I'm always, if there's an online chat for like any topic, I'm like, sign me up for the online chat. This is great.
I'm even in that category. Like, try to solve a problem on the phone, forget about it. By the time you get through hitting 1 and 4 and 8, and then you get hung up on. If they have chats, it works.
I know
better.
me and Amazon really, have that an online chat relationship. Let's just get on this online chat. But like, for this, topic, I just can imagine like it's just such an important tool. And I think that that's what's so important about, organizations like yourself and all of us who are in the mental health space, because, you have to kind of reinvent things and see, obviously, I'm sure there's issues that are coming up more frequently now. You said they're different than, which might have been, 10 years ago. So it's,
if I'm the person who says, okay, so-and-so, I know they have a problem, relationship, suicide, whatever, and I contact you, how would you typically handle that with me? I'm not the person with the problem. How would you tell me, like people who are listening who may want to call, how does that work?
So typically if someone's calling in concerned about somebody else, regardless of the situation, whether it's suicide or just something that's happening in that person's life that's causing them to couldn't be worried about them for whatever reason they're worried about them, we try to support the person calling us as well as the person calling us about. So we'll talk it out, what's going on for them that's making you concerned. If it's suicide, then we'll try to get some sort of idea of what's going on for them, how how severe the lethality is. Are they thinking about suicide? Do they have a plan? How far does this go? If it's a general crisis or a general concern, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling depressed, they're not communicating as much, or I know they're having issues at home. How do I help them? We have some psychoeducation that we could give in terms of, you can talk about this. Some people find it helpful to discuss this with those that they're concerned about. You can always give them our number to call us. You can always talk to them. If it's someone on Long Island or within the boroughs, then we can offer to call them ourselves if suicide is part of the concern. We also always want to make sure that the person calling us is feeling supported as well, because it's also hard. It's hard enough to call when you're calling about yourself, but it's also hard to call for somebody else. You're feeling that responsibility, you're feeling that level of worry that can really impact a person as well. So we want to make sure that that person is feeling okay as well, and see if there are any supports that we can offer them, referrals or any others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be touchy. Like you could feel like you're sticking your nose in somebody else's business where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line. I think, where you take it upon yourself to call. I mean, you have to be, you have to really be concerned, I think.
Yeah. A lot of people don't even know where to start though, or how to open up the conversation. So
where do I even begin? Having a referral, I think, like what you said, is so huge, because I was thinking of myself, obviously if you're in the field, like, you have certain tools in your toolbox, we're always saying on the show. And I think, I could imagine how helpless that is to be like, how do I help this person? What can I say? And especially when someone's dealing and with so many tough issues, you don't even know how to kind of navigate such a thing. So that's something you guys can help.
totally.
Well, like I read in some of the notes, referrals come from schools, hospitals, law enforcement. That's a lot of people, a lot of places. And how do they get the word that Long Island Crisis Center exists? We talked again about the outreach. You have a lot of work ahead of you. But you've been around since 1971.
Yes.
So I'm sure the word is out for people who are in your world.
Yeah.
But there's always new people coming along that don't know.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have done a lot over the last year, I would say, to push into the social media space, whereas our presence wasn't as big. We had hired a development associate. She has been out on maternity leave since December, but I know she was the one that set this up for us. So she's been really instrumental in helping to get the word out more, getting us kind of more on the local podcast circuit, interviews with local papers and things like that, partnering with more people like local influencers on Long Island. But schools all know us. Every year we do a mailing to all the schools across Nassau County with our information, as well as a request for materials form. So you had referenced those posters before.
Yeah.
We send those out to any school that wants them every year. We send out dozens of posters. We have our number really anywhere. Hospitals have them on the discharge papers for people. The police have our number. So the word is out there, but we can certainly be doing more.
So with the hotline, so they all have different numbers. How does that work? Because you said there's 6 different hotlines. So the first one I think you had mentioned was the Middle Earth one. So first of all, what would that be? What's the number for that?
Yeah, so the number for that is 516-679-1111. That is our original hotline, the one that was started in 1971. That is staffed by volunteers. Our volunteers go through a pretty lengthy 6-month training that includes what we call our marathon weekend, where they Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours both days. They learn about the basics of active listening. They learn about our data management system that we take calls in. They do a mental health 101 kind of thing where they learn about anxiety and depression. And then they have, I want to say it's 8 weeks. Is that what your class is?
The classes run 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yes.
8 weeks worth of classes, twice a week, where they're sitting and learning about things like suicide, intimate partner violence, child abuse, substance use issues. And then they're also doing role plays throughout that time. So they're getting a chance to kind of show off the skills that they've been learning, get assessed by administrative staff, see how they're progressing. Then they get paired with a seasoned counselor who sits there with them and listens to them take calls to provide real-time feedback. They do that for a few months. And then eventually when the CIT and the seasoned counselor decide that they have made enough progress, they can go for a solo evaluation. So it's a very lengthy process. They're
Where is that taking place?
Mostly now it's remote.
Yeah.
Prior to 2020, all of our volunteers were in the office. Our office was open literally 24/7 because we had overnight people that were there too. But I would say since the pandemic, only like 6 or 7 volunteers come in per week now. Everybody else does it remotely.
Whoever volunteers knows what they're getting into. I would
Yeah, well, and I think, I was thinking about that because it's not like, you're just taking someone's, order or something. It's like, it's really
Yes.
heavy issues and sensitive topics, so I think it's so important. And I'm glad because that was one of my questions, like for someone who's listening, because you want to know, like you're talking to someone who's really invested and has gone through, training for this. So
we call it skilled volunteering.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. And
Right.
you have people, and you have
Absolutely.
staff for 988 too,
Absolutely.
who decide this is more than I bargained for.
Yeah.
It's way more intense than I thought it was going to be. And
How difficult is it to get volunteers? It sounds like it might be difficult because it's a real commitment and you got to have a certain personality, I think, to be able to handle people's problems. And you used the magic word that I always like is listen. Listening is a problem we all have. I was in sales all my life, and the worst salespeople were the ones who didn't listen. I didn't hear anything, basically. And it's a problem in general.
Yeah.
And I can imagine the temperament of a person who's going through 6 months of volunteering before they get on the firing line. That's a tough.
Yeah.
That's a heavy duty volunteer.
Absolutely. Our volunteer numbers, to be frank, are not what they used to be. I think our 988 numbers, our counselors are pretty robust with that. We've got 60
paid 988 staff. 54 of them are counselors. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I believe we have about 57 volunteers right now.
Wow.
Wow.
Well,
Cool.
Otto,
Steady.
hold that thought. Hold that thought, Otto, because after the break, we will continue talking with Katie Stoll, Assistant Director for the Long Island Crisis Center, and Dani Silverstein, the 988 Director for all of Nassau County. We're talking about the Long Island Crisis Center. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
Welcome back to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Liu, along with my co-host, Otto Los, and we're diving right back in with Katie Stoll and Dani Silverstein, who are with the Long Island Crisis Center. And before the break, Otto, I know you were asking some number questions.
I had, like you have the volunteers, you mentioned 60 and then what the breakdown was within that, but how many calls a day typically come into the Long Island Crisis Center? And I guess that could be hard to measure because it comes in by a lot of different ways. What's number one, the total, and number two, how do they come in most of the time?
So I know on 988, our average call number per day is between maybe 25 on a lighter day and closer to 40 or 45 on a heavier day. We average over 11,000 calls a year, closer to 12,000 the majority of the time. Just on that one line alone.
This line that you gave us, the 6791.
No,
That's the 98,
actually,
not
that's-
the 981.
Yeah,
Oh.
for 988 alone.
Oh, 988. Okay.
Yes.
Wow, I could only imagine how. And with like before the break, we were talking about, the original, the OG hotline, the Middle Earth hotline. And that's like something that that's like the general one, if you're dealing with kind of like a wide variety of crisis, you would quote to call that one.
Yeah, I would say that Middle Earth and 988 are both general. 988, if somebody calls, no matter what they're going through, because it is the National Suicide Hotline, the counselor has to ask them about suicide.
Right. Okay.
So sometimes that turns people off from calling that line, or they think that well, I'm not suicidal, so I'm not going to call 988. But they absolutely can.
Okay,
As Dani
that
said,
was my question
yeah.
too. So if you
Yeah.
called that one instead, how does that work?
Yeah.
Now, if you call 988, is it directed to, you said it's national line? how does it get directed to you
Yeah,
here?
that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So typically, there's some geo routing right now, so it should ping off of your closest cell tower. However, if you have a 516 area code, you'll most likely get our counselors at Long Island Crisis Center. It usually goes by area code.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
631.
631 would get the center in Suffolk.
Okay, so you're in Nassau.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so we know people call you.
Mhm.
Typically, what's the like age range and status in life type of person? Who are they? Young children's parents? Or are they teenage school kids? Are they college kids?
Seniors.
Are they older people?
It's really anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Anyone and everyone. We do see an uptick in youth calls in September, January, when school is starting back up. We get most of our youth calls in those months, I would say. But really, we get calls from everyone about everything at any time.
Yeah.
It's pretty. There's no like real pattern to differentiate. But we get calls from people who are very young. We get calls from people who are older. We get calls from everyone in between, also socioeconomic statuses, all different situations. So that's why the training is so in depth, so that the counselors are equipped to really be there and support really anyone who calls in, regardless of who they are or what they're calling about.
We just done a training, I guess it was over the summer, for counselors who wanted to know more about how to talk with teens, because they were noticing like an increase in calls from teenagers and they weren't sure how to best handle those. So we did one of those. We also do seniors is one of our topics that we talk to our counselors about, like some issues that seniors could be facing, how to be mindful of, challenges that they might have, things like that. So like Dani said, it really is everybody, every problem, whatever they have.
Well, I think mental health compared to when I was all of your ages, mental health back then was very negatively looked upon. You were weak, you couldn't handle it, tough up, approach. And I think if there's a major positive in that whole area, the stigma of that is quite reduced.
Yeah.
And people get the fact that people have problems.
Yeah.
If you hear a ringing, it's my hearing aid.
I like that. I was like, wow, I'm not sure.
There's somebody at my front door.
Really like
That's a little sideline.
There you go. There. And all of our listeners, if you hear that ringing, someone is out.
I don't know who it is, but there's someone.
There you go. But what we always talk about on this show too, because we say like the stigma being reduced for mental health, and during this show during COVID, it was like a whole like shock to our system, right? We were on air, then we switched to doing it remote, and we all say to this day, that became like our little like support group.
Yeah.
So every Friday we were on our house and we were like in real time talking about what was going on and talking about our mental health. And then that's something that I do think like since COVID, like people were really, as a larger society started to realize, how important mental health was and how affected it could be, with things. So I think like that conversation, certainly started more. And then I look at like my little nieces and nephews, they're in schools now talking about it at such a young age, so like it's becoming more of like a place that we're able to talk about this. And even at Project Independence, I mean, I think I've been here for like 15, 16 years, and we would like, people never wanted to come to like a mental health, conversation or chat, and now, I mean, we're having them like all the time, in different things. So that I think is like, a hopeful thing that people are feeling more.
Well, I mean, it comes down to like, if I look back in my life, terminology, all right, they would call places nut houses and insane asylums. And, it was all very, very negative.
Yeah.
And the reality of the fact that people have problems that sometimes they just can't do anything about.
Yeah.
Everybody's mind, we all come in with this computer of ours with different, it's not like buying a Lenovo laptop,
Yeah.
It all has the same stuff in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
No,
It's
absolutely.
complicated, very complicated.
Very complicated. And I think what you were saying about things being called like the nut house or the insane asylum, language, how we speak about things like that too, is so important.
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was a kid, I heard these things, places like Creedmoor existed, and they were, I've heard terms here, which I would love to see a lot more of, therapeutic housing. I do believe that there is a need for people to be able to go to places that are safe for them and society, because they need extensive therapy.
Yes.
You know, it's not just walk in and fix it,
Yeah.
you know?
And it's fun. It's like
Such
a
a
fun
jolly
little thing.
rant.
Yeah, it is. It is like a jolly. You know,
I hope it's
keeps
not
the topic uplifted. You know.
I hope it's not the lawn guy.
But you know, with
I'll shut
with
that
these
off
different hotlines, you know, if you get a call, right, you're the volunteer who receives a call, and it just seems like it's just too big for your like wheelhouse to deal with, kind of thing. Is that something that you're able to directly kind of refer it to someone else? Like, how does that work if you're getting it and you're like, this is like beyond like something I can do?
Yeah, totally.
If we're gonna speak to Middle Earth, I'm gonna speak to
Speak
988.
to the hotline generally, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we never know what's going to be on the other end
Right.
of the phone when it's answered. So we do provide a lot of support for the counselors
Yeah.
themselves, a lot of supervision. I know for the paid 988 staff, they have individual supervision every month. They have group supervision every other month. There's 24/7 supervisory access and support. So there's always someone available to help debrief from a call, to listen in and potentially help de-escalate if the caller is having a difficult time. And really just be there to support the counselor, because we don't know what someone's calling about. And conversations can take a drastic turn at any time, really about anything. And it can be a little bit challenging sometimes. We don't get a lot of calls that the counselors feel they're not necessarily able to handle, I think, because the training is so robust and so in-depth. But of course, anything can happen. And when that does happen, we use it as a learning moment. Maybe there's something that we need a refresher on. Maybe there's something we need to do an in-service training about, or really amplify in the training class so that everyone feels more prepared for this.
You know, if you think about it, all fields where people are dealing with people all the time, doctors, nurses, whoever, even within that world, everybody's different in terms of how they can handle, you know, some get too detached, if you will. And then there are some people who are great doctors and probably they're too attached, you know. But who knows? Is a fine line.
Yeah. One of the questions we always ask in interviews is about self-care and what that person does for themselves. Things that they're able to do before a shift, during a shift, after a shift, because outside of external sources to help support them, like the administrative staff and the supervisors on call, it's important to have those things that they're able to give to themselves and do for themselves. So we do spend quite a bit of time really leaning into that. And we have a couple of programs internally that we try to run to help facilitate some more of that self-care and wellness. But that's a very big factor that we make sure the counselors are able to do that for themselves as well.
Yeah, because you don't think about that, getting those, really heavy topics all day long. It's so incredibly important. You guys are like the angels on the other side, so you need, to have that support. And I think that that's so wonderful that you've honed in on that.
I could visualize, otherwise people could get too. You want to be emotionally engaged.
Yeah, of course.
The reality of life is, for self-defense, if you will, you're going to wind up having a call with one of these.
No, and I think like people who go into this field are, have that gene, right? That they have that need to be empathetic and to listen and be like little sponges and stuff. But like sometimes that sponge gets, speaking from experience, sometimes that sponge is like, I'm tapped out, ring me out.
It's a lot like it. I know people asked to, and you see the world in a way, because that's what you do. And some police people have a problem getting away from that. And others can. So it's like life.
Yeah. We always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So how are you filling yours? Essentially. And, really trying to focus on making sure that that's something that everyone does, us included. We need to be able to do that too.
Well, and the other thing is, frankly, you cannot fix everything.
Right. Of course not.
Look at the wins and.
We talk to counselors about that too, just because a lot of times, calls don't end in this nice kind of neat packaged thing. They are still messy, or the person isn't ready to take the next step. They don't want to take the referral for therapy. They don't want to talk to their partner about the argument that they had. They kind of just wanted to vent, and that's okay. And the line is there for that. But sometimes counselors struggle with like, I didn't feel like I helped them, or like nothing's changed for them. We didn't make a plan. And we have to remind them that well, you gave them, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, to talk about their problem. You validated them. You maybe started planting seeds, but it is up to them to decide that they're ready to take the next steps.
Well, sometimes I think it's getting something off your chest and being able to talk about it is a relief.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have someone, to do that. And I think, obviously our show, we're dealing mostly with like the senior population, and those are people who are, could largely be isolated, right? There's so many seniors I know that, have literally no family, no friends. So you're just sitting there, dealing with, a whole host of issues, so having to be able to talk to someone, I mean, is just like goes such a long way.
I just was thinking, like, so we're dealing with a senior population. I think also we should think that we are dealing with the younger population also, so they can contend with the senior population.
Right, absolutely.
And the fact that they will someday be seniors. I was, my line, my grandson may become 13 and I'll look at him and I'll say, I was 13 once.
Yeah.
And they look at me like, really?
I can't believe it.
You couldn't have been 13.
Yeah.
So I think about it,
Absolutely.
the ability for all intergenerational, like we talk about, is important, I think.
Absolutely.
And if anyone, so are volunteers all ages, so if anyone, is there a certain age that you start with? Is
It'd be at least 18. Yeah. So it's 18 and up. I would say the majority of our volunteers, I think tend to skew older. People that maybe have retired, looking for something to do, or empty nesters. We do have a couple of volunteers that are college age students or like in their early 20s, trying to get experience before they go into a grad school program or something like that. That's when I started. Your staff, I think, tends to skew younger.
Yes. My 9 to 8 staff is, I'd say, between early 20s and maybe late 40s, I would say. They tend to between those two ages. Yeah.
Like dealing with a teenager, for example, who has a problem. Do you find that there's an age area that handles that better than another age group?
So I'll say for my staff, I find it's more personality types that handle those calls a little bit better. A little bit more of a focus on that individual counselor's counseling style and personality and how they approach their counseling as opposed to the age of that person.
Okay.
I'll say for my staff, that's typically what I say.
Okay.
If someone called, that just made me think, and they were like, let's say, they're a young, teenage girl, and they feel more comfortable talking to a girl instead of, a guy answers the phone. Can they say, like, I'd be more comfortable talking to, and then it gets like switched out or something, or
not typically. Yeah. What you're describing isn't really a problem, because I'd say we have like 95% of the counselors are women.
I mean, obviously,
but we do tend to tell them that all of our counselors are trained the same, because we will have people that call and say, like, somebody that's a senior that calls and they hear
like a young person.
Right? They're going to say, well, you don't have this experience. You don't know like what I'm talking about, or you can't relate to it. So all of our counselors are trained to say that everybody is trained the same. We could talk about whatever's going on for you. If somebody does insist on calling on, like, speaking to a woman or somebody that's older, we can tell them that they can call back, but there's no guarantee that they're going to get it.
Right. Makes sense. Right. So we talked about like 2 of your hotlines. So what's another one that you have to offer?
So we have the Children of Hope hotline, which is part of the National Safe Haven Coalition, I believe it's called. And that is, like I said earlier, to prevent the murder of infants. People had noticed a lot of babies being dumped by parents who did not want them. And this hotline is meant to kind of help eliminate some of the barriers that might keep people from keeping their baby. So if somebody is pregnant and they need housing, Children of Hope can provide that. If they need prenatal care, Children of Hope can provide that. Wow. If they need help paying for a hospital bill, Children of Hope can provide that. So again, it's like meant to stop some of the barriers that might prevent somebody from wanting to follow through with a pregnancy or keep the baby once they've had it.
That was one of the questions I had, is like preventing crisis. How do you set it up so that you don't get into that situation in the first place? It sounds like you don't do everything. Like if you have partnerships with people, maybe like you might steer them. There's certain specific situations?
So we have a really lengthy list of about, I would say it's close to 1,000 now referrals for agencies across Long Island, some into the boroughs, some up into the Hudson Valley, for things like long-term therapy, food insecurity, legal issues, housing issues, senior services, like support groups, bereavement services, like really financial issues, anything that you could think of. We most likely have a referral for it. So if somebody is in need of legal services, for example, we are not lawyers. We're not trained in anything that has to do with legal services. We can send them to one of the referrals in our database. If somebody needs food pantry, we have that information for them
That's
too.
invaluable. I mean,
it really is.
Yeah.
you call one place
Yeah.
with a crisis.
No, and just to get
and you
connected. Absolutely.
explain,
Well, Otto, we're going to get more into all these resources. After the break, we will continue talking with Katie Stoll, Assistant Director for the Long Island Crisis Center, and Dani Silverstein, the 988 Director for all of Nassau County, all about all the resources available at the Long Island Crisis Center. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Kristina Liu, along with my co-host, Otto Los, and we're diving right back in with Katie Stoll and Dani Silverstein from the Long Island Crisis Center. So before the break, we were touching upon, three. We only got to three of the hotlines. I know you have another three more. So what's some of the other available hotlines?
So we have the town of Huntington. As part of the contract with the town of Huntington, they have to have a 24/7 crisis line for their residents.
Okay.
So we answer that. Said Middle Earth 988, Children of Hope, Town of Huntington, the Nassau County Mobile Crisis Unit.
Oh, yes, that one.
Yeah, which I talked a little bit about earlier, but that is a behavioral health helpline. So it is also a crisis line. People do call it to talk like they would call Middle Earth or 988, but its main purpose is to dispatch the mobile crisis team.
so that gets sent to you.
That gets sent to us after hours or for overflow.
Okay.
Typically it's answered by the county, like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. But if they are slammed with calls, it'll get sent to us. If it's a holiday or a weekend or after 5 p.m., it gets sent to our center.
Oh,
Right.
wow. And what's that number?
Oh,
If not, we go
273 talk. No,
227 talk.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
227. I've seen that advertised.
While
thank you.
while offline, you said something about you refer somebody to go to a certain place for whatever the reason is, and you find out that you get feedback at that point that says that place is no longer doing whatever they're supposed to be doing. So that's an important point, I think, because you have an active go-to list where you've been working with all kinds of sources that are doing what they're supposed to do or not. And you modify where you direct people, based on what's really going on, which frankly, normal people can't do that. So you have all this education on having a list that's up to date, if you will.
Yes, one of our administrative staff members, it's a big part of his job to go through this list that we have every year, update it, reach out to those agencies, call them.
That's amazing.
Make sure they're still doing all the things that we have listed in our database. If they've added any new programs, if any new referral wants to be added, he goes out and he interviews them. He asks them a bunch of questions, see how they would be a good fit for us.
That's
It
valuable.
really is. It's incredible because I'm even thinking about, just, not even as heavy issues, it's at our job, like trying to have these resources and like things are changing. Even our list of libraries, it's like the turnover and you're like, wait, what happened? But also to Otto's point, in the break we were talking too, what is unfortunate that hopefully, as time goes on, it will get better, is that so many of these wonderful, mental health kind of services aren't taking new people, or there's these waiting lists, to get help. And I think that, especially if they're, taking insurance, there's different things, so it's
Yeah.
like a hot commodity, in this world. So I really hope that, as time progresses, we get more and more access to things, because I think that that is such a, if not the biggest barrier,
What,
a lot
what
of
do you
times.
consider the biggest challenges right today?
I would consider that to
Yeah.
be the biggest challenge.
I agree. I think knowledge of resources
Yeah.
is also a big part of that. I said during the break, I don't think a lot of people know what's out there in general. Even if you're in the field, you don't know what's out there in general. We get calls from professionals all the time
Yeah.
who are asking for referrals for things that they didn't know existed. So I think being aware of what's out there and then accessing what's out there
Yeah.
are kind of two sides of the same issue.
Interesting, because I find I live in North Hempstead, and Project Independence is 4 people in North Hempstead. And every time I go to my doctor or whoever I go to, do you know about Project Independence?
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying, how
Yeah.
can you not know? Well, the facts are that's what they don't do that for a living.
Yeah.
And you read the newspaper, there's nothing in there that says maybe, but point I think is very valid. How do you get the word out for all these things? There's just so much
That's why
out
you need
there.
shows like this, Otto.
Yeah, well, yeah, but when
No, and I think, because we're still in a time, we always say it's getting, and we're small organizations, all of us, to the extent of like the work that we're doing. And I think that it is so important, as we relate, but like to have a show like this where we're able to showcase every Friday, we get to showcase amazing organizations, and you guys are certainly no exception to it. It's just to get that word out, and it's still kind of this grassroots like initiative to get,
well, like
education
Project
about it.
Independence has what I call smart feet on the street. They
Yeah,
have
that's you, my friend.
social
That's right.
workers and
Rely on
nurses,
Yeah.
and they get the word about your place.
Mhm.
And that I'll get it.
Just dropping things
They
on
get
you.
the word and refer to
Yeah.
situations when they hear about a situation.
No, but I really like that you said, and
Or-
because we have, as I said, we oversee these social worker nurses, in our program, and after the show, I always come back and I say, we just had this great organization on. Here's the resource. Here's their brochure, whatever it might be, and I love the idea that you're saying that professionals can even call you guys,
Yeah, absolutely.
and say like, where do I? Because I think that is we have these. I mean, we have our little network here. Like, does someone know this? Where this? What's this organization? So I think that that's so great. I'm going to bring that back tonight and say, like, you could just call directly, guys. This is wonderful.
Yes, we get it all the time.
Yeah.
So we're always
All
happy
the
to talk to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
That's great.
And I think for people to call, they shouldn't be afraid to call. You may not have all the right questions or be prepared to, but your point about the training that the volunteers receive about listening, and like I'll use the term ICI, I'll change the wording, intelligent client interviewing, and listening.
Yeah.
So people who think they want to call shouldn't hesitate to call.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't make a wrong call.
Absolutely. We were talking about this earlier, just that like if somebody calls, they are in control the whole time, because if they get too nervous or something gets too like real for them, they can hang up at any point. That doesn't usually happen. Once they like say whatever that big thing that's been weighing on them is, they are usually relieved, and I would say pleasantly surprised to find that they're not getting like any kind of judgment from the counselor.
Exactly what I was just
They're
thinking.
being heard. They're being listened to in a way they maybe haven't been before.
Incredible.
A lot of people, probably me at times too, I'll have a friend who will talk to you and they'll start to tell you about their problems and whatever. And invariably, if I talk to somebody else, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember having that," and it always twists back
Yeah.
to the problem that they had. Okay, so you had the same problem, but it doesn't happen when you call your place,
Right.
which I think is a big difference.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So what is the 6th hotline after the mobile crisis unit? You had one more.
We have a contract with the town of Hempstead for a senior helpline. So it's for town of Hempstead residents who are 60 and above, or someone who's concerned about a town of Hempstead resident 60 and above. And that hotline also offers follow-up and outreach calls. So if there is an isolated senior in the town of Hempstead and they call in and they want somebody to call like once a week to check on them, we're able to do that. Or if I call concerned about like my grandmother in the town of Hempstead and I want somebody to call and check on her, we can offer that service as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great for us, frankly, in the town of North Hempstead.
That's kind of like what Project
but I'm saying
does.
there's a lot of times, we'll get, calls from other, and we always say, like, we're not gonna, like, turn, like, sorry, we can't help you. We're always gonna direct you to, someone that can help you, even if you don't live in the town of North Hempstead. So I do think that that's so great that, we're able to say now, like, hey, like, no, you can call here and then and get help for whoever. So that's really, I mean, it's just so.
So that's why Project Independence is go-to list.
Yeah, absolutely. I said our toolbox, man. We're bursting. We're giving so many referrals.
Well, I mean, even there, the nurses and the social workers of Project Independence have to diagnose or analyze the problem and listen to what the situation is and figure out where the shade to direct, the people. And really is it's a skill.
Yeah, and I was, we had, I guess it was last year or so. I can't remember now, but I think it was last year. Our whole staff, we did that mental health first aid training, and I think it was so eye-opening for all of us. I mean, and this was a room full of social workers and nurses who were in the field. But it's still. We all walked away learning something new, or like, what things that you should say, things that you shouldn't say. You might know, and it was so real, to watch these videos, and because you might think, listen, a lot of people think they're helping.
Yeah.
I have a bazillion friends who like think that they're, like helping, in a certain situation, and like, they're not malintent, but saying a certain thing, especially if someone's in, a crisis situation, is not always the appropriate thing to say. So I really highly recommend anyone that's listening. I said, whether you're a professional or just a resident to take that.
What's interesting to me is when we started the show, you pointed out that the number one reason people call is because of relationship issues, and that's not what I would have thought. But if I think about it in life, relationships are what we deal with for the most part.
Right. On so many levels.
Relationship with everybody in your life, right? Like your family, your coworkers, your friends. And so often that's what causes us turmoil when something is not going right in those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be because you had a fight with your boyfriend, although it could be.
Hey, listen, and then
because maybe there's an abusive situation. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, though, is that crisis means something different to everybody. It's such... It doesn't mean one thing. What's a crisis for me could not be a crisis for somebody else. So we're really open to whatever someone feels they need to call about.
And you guys are 24/7.
365. Wow. Yeah.
That's really.
Yeah, and the other part of what you're just saying is the level of crisis is relative to the person who's going through the crisis.
Yeah.
One person might look and say, give me a break. Whereas the other person, this crisis is impacting them so much that it could be an issue.
Right.
So I think a message is, it doesn't matter how severe you think this crisis is, call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our tagline is any problem, any person, anytime.
Yeah.
So I had somebody call yesterday on our business line, which is like just our office phone where people call to ask, like, can I do an internship, or like the copy machine company is calling to schedule a whatever. The woman called and she had an issue going on with her child and she needed referrals. And she said, I didn't want to call the hotline because I didn't think this was a serious crisis.
Yeah.
And I had to explain, like, no, this is definitely appropriate to call the hotline. There's no problem too big or too small. If it's a problem to you, you are absolutely entitled to speak to a counselor about it.
That's another benefit of calling one of the hotlines as opposed to trying to talk to a friend or a family member, because there is implicit judgment in that.
Of course, absolutely.
So, so often we have well-meaning people in our lives, but if you tell them something that they might not perceive as being a crisis,
it's like, get over it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
You'll be
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll feel better.
Think
soon.
of all
It's
the good
okay.
things you have going on.
It's all right. Just take a minute.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No, and I think, like, because we always say that is, I mean, I get it, I'm in the field, I said, but, you throw you in a personal relationship and like everything's out the window. You're like, but so that's why I think it's so important, to have this kind of comfortability and this like anonymity, to call you guys and to not have that judgment removed from the situation. I think in itself is such a, relieving.
Do you ever have people who've gone as a person who has had used the crisis center who winds up being a counselor?
I'm sure we have.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily collect that information. If
Because it's like so personal,
right. If people want
Well, I
to
mean, it's all
disclose that to us,
confidential.
I think I feel very confident in saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would think you'd be a very valuable counselor if you've gone through this.
Yeah, I know we have counselors that
Like
have.
abuse, drug.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
the peer.
yeah. I know we have
People who've
counselors that
been
have
there.
lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also get calls sometimes, and at the end of those calls, sometimes the caller will ask, how does one get a job with you? Or how does someone volunteer with the organization? So I'm sure we have,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
And then in addition to, I know we touched a little bit upon that you guys go out into the community to do these free workshops. So is that something that you do all over the place, or like, if a group wants you, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, we mostly do it in Nassau County. We do go into Western Suffolk sometimes. But yeah, if a group wants us, they can just get in touch. So like I said, we do mailings to schools every September. That's how the schools reach out to us. Last week, I was doing a presentation for actually a group of social workers who just needed a little bit of a refresher on like crisis de-escalation, because they don't do it in their everyday job.
Right.
So professional organizations who know us, whose networks we're in, will reach out and ask for a presentation as well. We did a whole series 2 years ago for the Nassau County Library System for all their librarians, which was super fun to do. But yeah, so anybody
That's
really.
an interesting one. Librarians, how would they get involved with the people with issues, really?
People use libraries as like a de facto social service kind of place, because librarians are usually very knowledgeable about the different organizations and social services that are around. Libraries are also open to the public, from 9 a.m., 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. roughly. So people go there and they just kind of, hang out, use the computers, use their resources. And sometimes they get people there that are in crisis or need to be de-escalated, or say something to the librarian that the librarian feels like they're not equipped to handle.
Yeah.
So we did a series on suicide prevention and crisis de-escalation for them.
But it just shows you, it's like, what we were talking about, the mental health, like first aid stuff, it's like, because anyone at any time, really, if you think about it, can be faced with having to be in that situation, whether it's personally or you're out in the world, with a stranger, whatever it might be. So I think it's so important to educate yourself on this. And like we said, it's not something that everyone just knows.
Well, I mean, a library one is one I would never have thought about.
But it makes so much sense when you do. Like,
it does make sense because libraries are not like they were when I was growing up. Libraries are now more like a community center, if you will. People do go there and they do like to hang out. It's a lot you can do in a library.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If you were interested in scheduling one of these workshops, what number would you call for that?
So you would call 516-826-0244. That's our general business line. And then you could just tell whoever answers that you're looking to talk to somebody about a presentation, and they would send you over to me.
Oh, great.
Now you can also go on a website.
Yes, LongIslandCrisisCenter.org.
Right.
Incredible. I mean, and I was looking, there's such a wide variety of topics, to do about this. And I think it's just important we always say, like, education is the key, right?
Well, do you have any main message you'd like to get out about the crisis center?
We're here to listen. Call us.
Yeah.
We have a lot of trained staff and trained volunteers who are ready, willing, and able to take any call from anyone, anytime.
Now, you're 24/7. So the people who volunteer, you mentioned the word shifts before. There are people who are actually ready to talk to you at 2:00 in the morning.
Yes, we have like 6 people that are ready to talk to you at 2:00 in the morning.
I'm sure a lot of calls actually would come in at 2:00 in the morning. Frank, I mean, I could see like a lot. It's like you're in, especially when it's like the wee hours and no one's around. I think
I think those calls, they're kind of hit or miss. Like either they are really busy or they're not busy at all.
Yeah.
But the calls tend to be more intense.
Yeah, right.
Overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't know, this could be a fact, but I think 2:00 in the morning, people who maybe had alcohol or, substances of some kind could be kicking in a little bit more.
I think too, like, nights are tough, right? Because I even have this conversation with my mom all the time. It's, it's like, it's quiet. And that's like when all of a sudden, like, the anxious, like, thoughts, like, start
or you're
going.
trying to go to bed and you can't get your brain to
I mean, I think we've all certainly been there. But guys, we are out of time.
Wow.
I want to thank you so much. You are both true angels, and I'm so glad you were here to shed light on your organization. I'd like to thank everyone that was listening. We'd like to thank our guests today, Katie Stoll, Assistant Director of the Long Island Crisis Center, and Dani Silverstein, 988 Director for all of Nassau County. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.